Hello, everyone. Welcome to Irash's World. Today, we have a special guest. We have Linda Trinh. How are you doing?
Very good, Arash. Happy to be here.
Great. And so, the first question is kind of tough, and we're going to dive into that question too. How would you briefly describe yourself to our audience here?
Um, I'm Vietnamese Canadian. I am a writer, a mother, a traveler, and I'm a person who's curious about faith and spirituality. I want to live my life in a meaningful way. I want to connect with other humans, and the way I feel I do that is through my writing.
Wonderful. That's awesome. Yeah. So, and speaking of writing, your book is Seeking Spirit, a Vietnamese non-Buddhist memoir, and I find it very interesting. On is in brackets, and just the word non-Buddhist I find very interesting too, and we're gonna dive into that. And so seeking spirit, right? So what is your book about? And you already say in the title that it's a memoir.
Yes. Yeah, thanks for the question. My book is about my personal spiritual journey. So, a little bit of my childhood, young adulthood, a specific period of time as a new mother. And it's really just I knew it as a young age that I wanted something more in my life. This spirituality, this idea of the divine, of the universe. And
Okay.
so I write in it while I was raised within the faith of Buddhism.
Mhm.
I never quite embraced it personally. It wasn't, it was surrounding me, but it wasn't something that was like, you must do this, which actually I really admire my parents and my mom for doing that, that she introduced me to that. And also being Vietnamese, there was ancestor veneration around, but it wasn't something that was, you must. So I kind of went seeking it myself, and my touchstones being Buddhism, but also different mythologies that I found really interesting around the world, and also being a traveler, being curious about different faiths and different traditions, and trying to put that all together in a way that might make sense or might be relevant to somebody, not just me.
Yeah, and so in many ways, so there are two things that again I can relate to as well. Parents being open
Mhm.
and in that sense of not their ideas onto you. I think that is hugely important, so we can figure things out for ourselves.
Yeah.
Important, but also the having the privilege of having other cultures that we're coming from and other experiences, and to be able to compare and contrast.
Yes.
And often we see many people think in a monocultural way, and there this is the way, and this is how I was brought up. But once you do that, it gets also a bit confusing because then I find I don't really have a home, right? I'm just kind of like
Yeah.
restless nomad.
Yeah, that definitely bubbles up through the book. I was born in Vietnam, and then I came to Canada when I was 3 years old. So that idea, like being part of the diaspora, is, am I Vietnamese enough? Am I Canadian
Mhm,
enough?
mhm.
I do have these traditions and going to like a Vietnamese temple, but at the same time, going to school with so many different kids from different backgrounds, cultures, traditions. And so, just what you said, Arash, it's like, well, who am I? And
Mhm.
where it is a privilege to be able to explore and to seek. And then it can be confusing and overwhelming to decide, well, what is it that I believe? What is it that is in a true sense for me? So it is both quite interesting to be able to do that. And it's not easy at the same
Oh
time.
no, it's not easy at all. And just for me to throw in, I grew up in Germany, and so, but
Yeah.
just the assumption that the way you look and your name and where you're
Yeah.
born does not
Yeah.
mean that you are from those places. And my mentality is more German than anything else, and also
Oh,
mixed with
yeah.
Canadian of certain values too. So it's interesting. But then, as you say, it seems like sometimes they don't accept you, right? Whether it's your own original culture or the host culture, and so it gets very confusing and it's tough. It can be very
Yeah.
difficult.
Because you are like, I'm trying to be uniquely who I am, and
Yes.
that unique mix
Mhm.
that doesn't necessarily fit in any kind of box, right? When you
Yeah,
ask,
that's it.
who
That's it.
are you? What is your identity? It's like, well, there's this part, but also here are the things that I picked up along the way. And so the complicatedness is the enriching part of life,
Yes.
though. That is the
Yeah.
joy. That is
Yeah.
the, as you say, the privilege of being able to wander and to figure out for
Well,
oneself.
life is messy, right? And so, and people don't like that. People want clear-cut answers, like, is this yes or no? And I like how you are delving into that with a very open mind. So it's like the idea of like not getting to answers, but getting the questions right.
Oh
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I think I would say my book is all about the questions. I have no answers.
Mhm, mhm.
There are questions, the big questions that I would say that I ask in the book. Where do I come from? What is the purpose of my life? What happens at the end? Talking about the afterlife. But yes, it's in picking up some of the pieces of like my lived experience, but also traveling to Egypt, traveling to Greece, going back to Vietnam on several trips. I get pieces of those, and
Mhm.
like that kind of helps inform the question. And I think that's the richness of it. But do I ever get to the answers? I don't know.
And there is also no rush, you know. You will eventually, things fall into place too. And it's like when you're driving like too much for answer, looking for answers, and you don't
Yes.
get them, you get frustrated. But I think the questions is kind of like you're more curious about it, and you explore, and again with an open mind and with curiosity. And I think that is so much more important than having the answers. I mean, that's kind of boring. Once you have the answers, well, what
Oh,
do you do
yeah.
next? You know?
Yeah. And you may have the answer for the time,
Mhm.
and then that changes with
Yeah.
another event or something else external that happened in your life. And then you have to incorporate that as well.
Mhm. And one of the things that again enriches life, and it doesn't seem so, and it's usually experienced as negative, but can be turned into something positive, is trauma. The experience
Yeah.
of trauma and the challenges and so on. We would rather not have them in
Yeah.
our lives, but what we can work with them, and so
Yeah.
we can learn from them, we can grow from them, and so on. So, what would be some of the things you talk about in your book about that experience of trauma, the difficult moments?
Like you said, it's something that do people want to avoid? Do people want to? It's surprising when it happens. Unfortunately, it is a part of life.
Yeah.
So one of the key moments of my life is when my father passed away when I was 7, and we were in a new country, and my mother became a single parent. That that was very difficult for everyone in the family, and how I thought about it as a kid versus how I think about it now. It's something that acceptance is very challenging,
Mhm.
and being able to adapt is very challenging, but at the same time, that's what you need to do. What else can you do to
Yeah,
be
what else
able
can you
to
do?
move on?
Exactly. Yeah, I love
um,
that. Yes.
and then I talk about going through a period of adulthood where times were not great at work. I was trying to grow my family, my husband and myself, and also I was reaching out specifically to Wanam, which is like the Vietnamese bodhisattva of mercy, and trying to kind of um, be more intentional about my spirituality. And nothing I was doing was working. There were just life events that were going on
Mhm,
where it
mhm,
was, how do you hold grief in a space, but you still have to pay your bills, still have to get up and take care of my toddler and move on with life.
mhm.
And you can rest for a while and recuperate, but at the same time, life calls. There's still things you need to do.
Mhm. One thing I quite like is called radical acceptance, when you accept everything. And I think the idea, the misperception that people have is giving up, and that's not giving up. It's actually also liberating, because once you accept things, then you, okay, what can I do with this? How can I move on and onward? And like you're saying, to give it the space, not ignoring it, not dismissing the pain and the grief, but then moving forward with that and accepting
Yes.
it as, again, as you say, part of life, which Buddhism says also life is suffering. which is also something I slightly disagree with because I love Buddhism, but that it's like, no, life is more than suffering.
Yes. I think I spent a lot of moments through that time period with work where if only it was different, if only this didn't happen
That's
to
it.
me.
Mhm,
And what I learned through that is, but that didn't change anything. It
mhm,
did happen.
mhm,
It is messy. I am
mhm,
going through this. And so, in a way, I myself did that too. Like I prolonged my grief or I prolonged my suffering.
mhm. Sure.
Where, yeah, thinking about some of the touchstones of Buddhism is things are impermanent, things will
Mhm,
change.
mhm,
So, trying to, again, not easy to do, trying to work through that and get out of my own way um, was something I had to go through the hard way.
yeah. But spirituality helps, right?
Yeah.
Your spiritual beliefs as well as writing and expressing that, I think is very helpful too.
Yes, I definitely weave throughout the book that I always knew I wanted to be a writer when I was young.
Mhm.
Um, that was not the dream of my mother and father.
Yeah.
They
Same
wanted
here.
to be, you know, I'm sure you can guess, doctor,
Yeah.
um, computer scientist, you know, things that in their mind, of course, right, that were stable. And yeah, you do have to put food on the table. But that was my dream to be creative and to
Mhm.
write. And I set that dream aside. I knew I had to do more practical things. And then I found more space for myself when my daughter was born, where I was, okay, can I just focus on what I want to do? Is that selfish? But at the same time, how does that weave into the spirituality that I'm trying
Mhm.
to be more intentional about to find a purpose, to find meaning? And so, yeah, creativity and spirituality became so interlinked as well, as in, this is what nourishes me, this is what fills my bucket so that
Mhm.
I can go and do my day job and go and do everything else that life needs that needs to be done for life.
And I like also the longing, so longing for a spiritual life, longing for filling this up, but also belonging. And when you get to that's another kind of longing, but
Yeah.
then once you get to the spiritual realm, you do belong, and it doesn't matter again where you're from, or again your race or gender or ethnicity, all that. It doesn't matter because at that point, it's like another realm where everyone
Yes.
is truly equal. And I think in our views, we don't see that, we don't interact, we always like judging other people or have preconceived notions about them. But I feel when I shift into that kind of state,
Mhm.
yes, it's very different, and you don't see the tiny things that actually are not that important, essentially, because again, we're all spiritual beings.
Yeah, I agree with that. In terms of things fall away, it's
Mm-hmm.
the connecting human being to human being, spirit to
Mm-hmm.
spirit. Like, have you had concerns like I have?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Are you also trying to do these things? Have you also had a sense of longing? Have you also had a sense of grief, of belonging? And so, trying to find that for myself, I hope in a way connects with others as well, that spirituality and faith, while it can exist within institutional religion, that's not the only path, that's not the only way, that you can make it about just look at the signs in your life and the your own
Yeah.
experiences and what makes you, I would say, what makes me the most me. And
Exactly.
then how can I bring that into the rest of my life? And so, yeah, uh, like thinking about how I grew up with ancestor veneration, and we just went through a period of Lunar New Year, and making offerings to the ancestors. So that was quite quite a big part of my life growing up, and something that has carried me into the future. Thinking about people who have passed on, thinking about my father,
Mhm.
and still believing that I have that connection to him
Mhm.
has helped me in my life.
Mhm. Now, I'm curious, you mentioned afterlife, and and you talk about it in your book, right, about the afterlife. And so, what is your perception of it? Anything that you'd like to share here? Has been your experience of that and some of your beliefs?
Um, it's very interesting that the afterlife bubbles up in so many traditions around the world,
Hmm.
like just overall.
Hmm.
I talk about in the book going to the Valley of the Kings in Egypt and going to see the terracotta warriors in China. And these were two monarchs who were thinking about what they could bring into the afterlife and take with them.
Hmm.
And, many, many kilometers, miles apart, years apart, having that same idea. And me personally, living in Canada in this day and age, I have those questions too. And thinking about, well, the connection to my ancestors who, when we came to Canada, I didn't grow up with grandparents. I'm not, who are my great grandparents, my great great grandparents. Um, but also believing that I have a connection to a space and a tradition, and then having instances when I think about, I wrote about in the book on my wedding day that
Hmm.
we offered tea to the altar for my father, and feeling his presence there,
Yes.
and that was my experience,
Yes.
and that is true for me,
Mhm.
um, and that made the day extra special.
I would say it's true in general, but people would disagree, and that's fine.
Yes,
Right? But
and that's
but I
fine.
yeah, that's fine. But I think that's really important to have that too. I think it in many ways it anchors us in again a spiritual tradition, and
Yes,
most spiritual traditions and religions do talk about that,
yes,
as you say. So there's something that they have in common, and whatever happens afterwards, but still there's something going on. I think.
yes.
Yeah.
And that knowledge that it's not just me asking these questions or yourself, but that people around the world for centuries, for generations have had these questions, I think connects us all, that these are valuable questions, that are they knowable?
Hmm. Yeah.
How
From
can you
my
say for sure? Yeah,
personal
sorry.
experience, when my dad was passing away, I told him to come and see me after,
Yeah.
when he goes there. And then 3 days later, I had a dream, and he was there. It's like, here I am. So what do you want to talk about? And
Yeah. Oh,
I'm absolutely sure that was him, because I felt that
exactly.
presence, like you say, and I talked to him, and so it's really like, I think that's like some of the answers, or kind of bits and pieces and clues that we get in our life, and those are signs, and I believe in them.
Yeah. I 100% agree. I believe in the signs as well. There are other moments in the book where I talk about, I can only call them spiritual experiences
Hmm.
that were, I was open to them, but at the same time, um, there's a moment in the book I talk about rocking my daughter to sleep. She's going down for a nap, and same thing I do every single day. She was around 14 months old. I had just gone back to work after maternity leave. I'm thinking in my head of the future, like I have all this laundry to do, I have chores to do. Like she has to fall asleep so I can go do these things. And she looked at me and I looked at her, and we just shared this moment. And it was so ordinary and so mundane, but it's so extraordinary
Hmm.
in that sense that it was so different, and it made me pause. And yeah, I can still recall what that felt like, what
Hmm.
that meant to me.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it was, this is the moment.
Yes.
This is it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's wonderful. When we see that, when we appreciate it, when we experience it, because that is again, and it will always stay with us. Like those are the gold memories here that we have. And I was wondering if you can read parts of your book to us, so we can hear your voice in the book, and your writing. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. I think I will read the prologue.
Mhm.
So that kind of just sets up the book overall, and starts my questions. Is this it? I had asked myself that question many times since reaching adulthood. Living on the surface of my life felt like a superficial existence, and by not mining deeper to the mantle, outer core, and inner core, I had not fully unearthed its richness and depth. As I peered beyond the horizon to the rest of my life, endless blue sky and glittering snow on the prairies where I made my home, I foresaw more of the same, an infinite stretch of ordinary life. The routine consisted of waking up and going to work, fixing the same meals, lamenting over the fast-paced nature of the daily grind, then wishing for just a moment to be able to take a full breath. I had everything I thought I should want. I was living out the typical immigrant's dream, to be a wife and a mother, someone who worked a steady job and owned a house in the suburbs. And yet, the question still bubbled up. Is this it? What is missing? I was blessed with love, family, and valuable experiences, and yet my gratefulness never lasted long. My feelings dissipated into the ether, the empty spaces between the stars, a dark void, a nothingness found throughout the universe. I felt this empty space deep within myself, not filled with anything I could touch, taste, or possess, no matter how hard I tried. Even when I was content in the other areas of my life, this part of myself still felt empty. This empty space called out for spirit. When I thought about spirit, I imagined some sort of light that illuminated outside and inside. I imagined an awakening, an enlightenment of body, mind, and soul that connected me to something that just transcended the ordinariness of life. I believe spirituality could exist within the realm of institutional religion and also without any religious foundation. Prayers, rituals, and ceremonies have long been performed and practiced by us all, through generations past, in all parts of the world. Swirling around me were the spirits of my ancestors from Vietnam, the country of my birth, the Buddhist traditions of my childhood, as well as the goddesses and gods of the mythologies of long ago civilizations. From all these bits and pieces of myself, I felt the need to fashion a mantle to ward off the prairie chill. I longed to invite spirit in and to sense its spark within myself. How do I find what I am seeking? In my darkest fantasies, or perhaps my lightest moments, I wondered what it would be like to leave it all behind and create a different life in a different way, in a different space. Quit my job, travel the world, find myself. What would it be like to leave all my loved ones and all my responsibilities? That might be too extreme. I didn't want to leave behind the life that I had built. I was not trying to escape my life, only to enrich it. There had to be another way, a middle path. I needed to seek spirit within the structure of my own life. I doubt I am the only one who has felt this empty space. I can't imagine I am alone in my need for something more. This is my journey through ice and fire, space and time, walking along the edges of the land of the living and the land beyond, believing and questioning, stumbling and soaring. This is my path of what I learned and what I had to unlearn to seek the sacred. My journey is only one of many paths that a seeker may take. Perhaps by weaving the pattern of my path, a familiar thread or recognizable fabric might emerge that shows how we are all interconnected. This interconnection exists between the stars as well. While I see nothingness in space, space is not truly empty. Instead, it is filled with interstellar gas and dust. The dust of the stars gives life to me and to all life in the universe. The starlight burns brilliantly in the darkness. Perhaps like space, I am not empty. Perhaps I am not nothingness. I need to seek to find my own interconnection between the stars.
That's wonderful. That's very beautiful. And I could so relate to that, to all parts of it pretty much, because it's I felt like again there was contentment. I was like satisfaction. I was satisfied with my life. There's a lot of good things, but then there was something missing. And then what to do? Do we go to the extreme? And I thought, go to a monastery and try to figure things out, or which again the path I took, try to find that whatever it is in the structures, as you say, of my own life. And I think that was a wise choice in my case too. I hope you feel the same way.
Yes, I think that perhaps a lot of people have that,
Hmm.
right? It's like, okay, well, do I make drastic changes? But at the same time, I have responsibilities, but I love my life. I don't want it to seem that I am ungrateful of all my blessings and, and the contentment. But as you say, it was something was missing. And,
Hmm.
think of it as spiritual emptiness. So I know that I can't buy it. I can't
Hmm.
consume it. So if I have those other pieces, what else could that look like? And so that is the journey, right? It's like, well, this is life, and here are all the parameters and the messiness and the other stuff that comes in. But also, how do you find meaning in the ordinary, in the
Hmm.
mundane?
Hmm. Exactly, exactly. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Linda Trinh. So I just want to remind everyone you're a Vietnamese Canadian author of nonfiction as well as for kids, right? And so you
Yes.
do have the author of the Nguyen Kids series. What can you tell me about again maybe writing for kids and with kids as your audience? What kind of experience is that, and what has been your experience personally of that?
Oh yeah, thank you for mentioning that. So yeah, author of the Win Kids. So it's a series of 4 books, and it's for early chapter book series. So for kids starting learning how to read, independent readers, ages 6, but I would say and above, because I just think it's accessible. It's beautiful illustrations from Clayton Wynn, the illustrator. And I would say whether it's fiction or nonfiction, I write about the same kinds of things: identity, spirituality. And writing for kids is very challenging,
Mhm. I can
very
imagine.
humbling.
Mhm.
Kids are smart and they have so much access to so much content. So to keep their attention. So in the first book of the series, The Secret of the Jade Bangle, it's a Vietnamese Canadian family, and their grandmother has just passed away. So um, again, it's that longing, and what
Mhm.
does that look like? And so the spirit of the grandmother comes back to visit Anne, the eldest child, and they have this relationship. And so her grandmother spirit teaches her how to cook food from Vietnam to appease the ancestors. And so one of the privileges of writing for children is going into schools and libraries and talking with young readers and connecting with them and having stories told by them that this is the way that this is the tradition that I also believe in, or when my aunt passed away, I had this experience. So giving them language in which to speak about that, and also space in
Mhm.
which to talk about things that are tricky for kids. Because I also talk about racism, I talk about belonging, but also that idea of the unknowable, and not introducing it necessarily, but just validating it, mirroring it, just representing it for young
Mhm.
readers.
Mhm. And in a certain way, treating them as adults. I mean, although it's for age appropriate and so on, but not looking down on them or
Oh
again
yeah,
respecting them. And I
yes.
that's so daring to actually do a questions and answers with kids because I can imagine there's like very tough questions.
Oh,
I'd
I've
rather
had
have the
lots of
adults
challenges.
than the kids.
Yes, yes. The ask me anything question, but I always put it also a little asterisk. Well, you have the choice, the freedom to ask me anything. I also have the choice to answer those
Oh,
questions. But yes,
perfect.
they do. They are smart. They know
Yes,
what is going on. Yes.
yes, absolutely. And so do you. Yeah, thank you so much for being on Arash's World. Your book again is Seeking Spirit, a Vietnamese non-Buddhist memoir, which is appearing soon. And yeah, so thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for the beautiful conversation, and yeah, all that you do as well.
Best of luck.